NVIDIA earnings are out next week. The semiconductor sector as a whole is up by about 20% year to date, just over that. And the earnings report for NVIDIA could bring it to new highs. But if you want to play in the semi space without having to cash into specific names, then you might want to look into some sector ETFs. For more, we have John Mayer, who is the JP Morgan Asset Management Chief ETF Strategist, as part of the ETF report brought to you by Invesco QQQ. John, great to have you back in studio here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this. I mean, of course, this is one of the bellwethers for the earnings season, but it puts a spotlight back on the semiconductor industry once again. For those who are looking across sector-specific ETFs, are there other ETFs that have specific weightings and look across these components that you are keeping at the top of your docket versus others?
Yeah, I first of all, I think it's important for the industry to have a bellwether post these really strong earnings. And if you think about all the kind of the downstream implications for all the suppliers, all the where are the GPUs stored, right. Data centers, how are they powered, energy, utilities. So there's so many downstream implications from these large semiconductor names that are coming out with these strong earnings. We're in the beginning stages of generative AI, right. And a broad-based ETF that has exposure to a swath of names, I think is certainly a way to go, to diversify your exposure.
How risky is that when you have one name that is having an outsized buoy effect on the industry as well?
There's so many downstream positive implications, like I had mentioned. The suppliers, all the suppliers that are these large bellwether names it's really important. And again, you have who's benefiting from generative AI. Right. We're in inning 1 or 2 of generative AI, right? So if you think about like the smartphone value chain, there's so many downstream implications. And if you actually make some comparisons to the smartphone, came out 15 years ago, people are like, what do you do with this? Well, apps, all of the cases that go on, these are all industries, multi-billion-dollar industries that were created around that ecosystem. I think that's a better comparison than, say, like the dot-com bubble. This is not a dot-com bubble from my perspective.
Interesting. And so are there ETFs that you're tracking that can ride on the semiconductor coattails right now?
There are certain ETFs out there, but I think an active management approach is really the way to go. So if you look in the growth area, you look at an active manager, they are going to have exposure to semiconductor names and the ecosystem surrounding it and all the companies that provide data for generative AI. I think that's really important. So looking at bottoms-up research, I think is a way to go. And at JP Morgan, we do focus on actively managed ETFs. And I think that's the place to be.
It's so interesting, especially because if you kind of do this, hub and spoke, and you put the spokes out there to say all of the things that are also beneficiaries of generative AI as this hub. You've got cybersecurity, you've got data centers as well. You can layer in even energy that's necessary to supply to the data centers. So all of these things considered, there are those different spokes. Are there certain areas that you're seeing investors really gravitate towards?
Yeah, I think data center is an area investors are gravitating towards. Utilities are really interesting. In a declining rate environment, utilities tend to do better because there's less yield options out there. This environment, I think many different sectors, in particular utilities, are adapting themselves to the current environment. And that's providing the massive amount of energy that's required for these data centers. And that's only going to increase over time.
Well, yeah, especially if we get to what has been expected to be at some point a 1 million chip data center. We'll see when that comes to fruition. Right now, we're still at about 60,000. Still a mind-boggling number.
Yes.
John, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us in the studio.
Thanks a lot.
John Mayer, who is the JP Morgan Asset Management Chief ETF Strategist.